You are in the middle of a conversation. Nothing intense, nothing heavy. Someone asks you a simple question. What do you think? There is a pause. Not because you don't have a thought. Not because your mind is empty. But because something in you hesitates. A small internal calculation happens. So fast you barely notice it. Is it worth saying? Will it change anything? Will it create tension? And before you consciously decide, the moment passes. You say something neutral, something agreeable, something smooth. Yeah, that's fine. You hear your own voice, and it sounds normal, even calm. But inside, a quieter truth remains unspoken. Not dramatic, not explosive, just absent. You move on. The conversation continues. From the outside, nothing looks off. From the inside, something subtly folds inward. Not in pain, not in crisis, in familiarity. Because you've done this before, thousands of times. You don't remember the first time. Most people don't. You don't remember a moment where you consciously chose silence. You don't remember a day where you said, I will stop being honest. It didn't happen like that. It happened gradually, through tiny experiences, tiny observations, tiny conclusions. A child noticing that certain truths made adults uncomfortable. A child noticing that certain emotions changed the atmosphere. A child noticing that some honesty led to dismissal. Some honesty led to defensiveness. Some honesty led to consequences. And some honesty simply disappeared into nothing. No response. No acknowledgement. Just air. So the child began to learn something. Not as a belief. Not as a sentence. As a feeling. Silence keeps things smoother. Silence keeps things predictable. Silence feels safer than risking the wrong kind of truth. Not safer in a dramatic sense. Not life or death. Safer in the nervous system sense. Safer meaning less disruption, less unpredictability, less emotional movement in the room. So the child experiments. They hold back a little. They soften a reaction. They don't correct. They don't clarify. And something important happens. Nothing bad occurs. No explosion. No punishment. In fact, things stay calmer. So the system records. This works. Not because it's morally right. Not because it's healthy. Because it reduces friction. And reducing friction feels like safety. Over time, the child doesn't experience themselves as someone who is hiding. They experience themselves as someone who is easy, good, mature, understanding. These words feel warm. They feel like belonging. So the pattern deepens. Silence stops feeling like an action. It becomes posture. It becomes orientation. It becomes the default setting. You grow up. You gain language. You gain opinions. You gain complex inner experiences. But the old orientation remains quietly in place. Before you speak, something checks. Will this make things harder? If the answer is unclear, you lean toward quiet. Not because you're dishonest. Not because you're manipulative. But because honesty at some point felt risky. So you learned a softer version of truth. A diluted truth. A version that won't ripple too far. A version that won't disturb the surface. You may still be a very sincere person. You may value authenticity. You may dislike lying. And you don't lie. You simply omit. You edit. You compress. You choose the least disruptive sentence from the list of possible sentences. Most of the time, you don't even notice you're doing it. It feels like tact. It feels like maturity. It feels like emotional intelligence. And in many ways it is. But it is a specific kind of emotional intelligence. One shaped around keeping peace, not around expressing interior reality. So now, as an adult, you might notice certain patterns. You rarely say what you actually want in the moment. You often realize what you felt only later. You replay conversations in your head and think, I wish I had said that. You are better at writing your feelings than speaking them. You are better at thinking than voicing. You are better at understanding than being understood. This doesn't feel tragic. It feels normal. It feels like who you are. But underneath that normality, there is often a quiet cost. Every time you don't express something true, something small happens inside. Not a rupture, not a collapse, more like a tiny withdrawal. A fraction of yourself steps back, again and again, over years, so small you don't notice, until one day you realize, people know me, but they don't quite know me. Not because they are careless, not because they don't care, but because you've been offering a curated version, a peaceful version, a version designed to coexist, not collide. You might feel lonely even in company. Not dramatically, not acutely, just a faint sense of distance, like standing behind a thin glass wall. You can see others. They can see you, but something doesn't fully transmit. You might struggle to explain this loneliness, because nothing is obviously missing. You have conversations. You have relationships. You are included. And yet, there is a subtle absence. Often what's absent is your unfiltered interior. Not because it's dark, not because it's unacceptable, but because it was never practiced. Honesty is a muscle, not a moral trait. If you didn't get to exercise it safely, it didn't develop ease. So using it now can feel awkward, heavy, risky. You may notice your body reacting before you speak. A tightening in the chest, a shallow breath, a slight tension in the throat. Not panic, not fear, more like hesitation stored in tissue. The body remembering. Speaking can change things, and change once felt unsafe. So you learned another pattern. You wait until you are absolutely certain, absolutely justified, absolutely logical, before expressing anything. But emotions are not always logical. Preferences are not always defensible. Needs are not always tidy. So many things never pass the internal approval process. They remain inside, unspoken, unwitnessed. You may pride yourself on being low drama, on being chill, on not making things a big deal. And again, none of this is wrong. But sometimes low drama also means low expression. And low expression has consequences. Not explosive ones, slow ones. It can show up as a vague sense of disconnection from yourself. A feeling that you're not fully in touch with what you feel. Not numb, not empty, just slightly out of focus. Like trying to read a page through a thin fog. You sense there is more there, but you can't quite grasp it. Because expression helps clarify experience. When something stays inside, it often stays blurry. So you may think, I don't know what I feel, when the truth is closer to, I'm not used to hearing myself. There is an important distinction here. You are not incapable of honesty. You are not blocked. You are not broken. You are skilled at silence. Silence kept you safe. Silence kept things stable. Silence was adaptive. That deserves acknowledgement. You didn't choose silence because you were weak. You chose silence because, at some point, it worked. That matters. And what worked in one environment doesn't have to remain permanent in another. Not because the world is suddenly safe. Not because people are suddenly perfect. But because you are no longer powerless in the same way. You have more agency now. More language. More choice. More ability to leave, to pause, to set limits, to reevaluate. You are not the same small nervous system navigating a large, uncontrollable world. Even if parts of you still feel young. Sometimes this realization brings a strange mixture of relief and grief. Relief because maybe nothing is wrong with me. Grief because I've been carrying this alone. Both can exist. There is no rush to resolve either. There is also a common fear tied to honesty. If I say what I really think, I will hurt people. If I say what I really feel, I will create conflict. If I say what I really want, I will be rejected. These fears are not irrational. They are memory-based. They come from earlier experiences where honesty led to rupture, withdrawal, or dismissal. So the nervous system associates honesty with loss of connection, and silence with preservation of connection. The system chooses connection every time because humans are wired for connection, not for self-expression in isolation. So your pattern isn't self-betrayal. It's connection preservation. Understanding this reframes everything. It removes moral weight. It removes self-blame. It becomes, this is how I learned to stay connected. And now, gently, are there other ways I can stay connected too? Not better ways. Not morally superior ways. Just additional options. This is where awareness becomes powerful. Not because it forces change, but because it offers choice. You might start noticing small moments where you could speak a little more truthfully. Not big confessions, not confrontations. Small, saying, I actually don't feel like going out tonight. I'm not sure about that. I need a moment to think. I prefer something else. These are not declarations. They are signals, tiny signals to your own system. My voice exists. My preferences exist. My inner experience exists. You don't have to push through fear. You don't have to suddenly become direct. You don't have to overhaul your communication style. You can move at the speed of trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your capacity to handle the outcome. And sometimes the outcome will be slightly uncomfortable. Not catastrophic,